Hi there. Welcome to Hushed History Channel. Tonight, we're slipping into the sandals of ancient Rome's most powerful virgins. You're about to step inside the circular temple where 6 women control the fate of an empire, where a single flicker of flame going out could doom civilization, and where you'll discover that being a virgin priestess involves way more animal blood than you'd expect. Fair warning. If you actually had to live this life, you'd probably last about 3 days before accidentally letting the sacred fire die and getting flogged to death. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. All right, let's begin the story. You wake in absolute darkness, your body trained after years of practice to sense that dawn is still 2 hours away. The marble floor beneath your narrow bed radiates cold through your thin mattress, and you can hear 5 other women stirring in their cells along the corridor. No roosters crow in the Forum Romanum yet, no merchants rattle their carts over cobblestones, but you must rise. The fire waits for no one. Your fingers find the rough wool of your white stola in the darkness. You could dress yourself blindfolded by now, and essentially you do. The suffibulum, that distinctive white veil that marks you as a Vestal virgin, settles over your carefully braided hair. 7 braids, always 7, twisted with white wool ribbons in the style of a Roman bride. Except you'll wear this bridal hairstyle for 30 years without ever meeting a groom. You pad barefoot through the atrium, past the pool that reflects pre-dawn stars, and push open the heavy bronze doors to the inner sanctum. The smell hits you first. Centuries of smoke have soaked into every stone, creating an atmosphere thick with burnt offerings and sacred oils. There it is, Vesta's fire, glowing red in its circular hearth, the same flame that Aeneas supposedly carried from burning Troy. The night watch Vestal nods at you, exhausted from her 6-hour vigil. You take her place on the low stool, lifting the bronze poker to stir the embers. This is your primary job, the one that supersedes everything else. Keep this fire burning. If it dies, Rome dies. At least that's what everyone believes. And belief has a funny way of making itself true when you're dealing with the morale of 1 million citizens. You add a fresh oak log, whispering the morning prayer to Vesta. The goddess of the hearth doesn't demand flowery hymns. She prefers simple words, honestly spoken. Some historians argue whether Vesta was even personified as a goddess, or remained an abstract concept of home and hearth. But you don't particularly care about theological debates at 4 in the morning. The fire needs tending. That's what matters. Your stomach growls, reminding you that breakfast won't come for hours. First, you must clean yesterday's ashes, sifting them carefully. Nothing contaminated can remain near the sacred flame. You carry the ashes to a special repository, adding them to centuries of accumulated sacred debris that will eventually be ceremonially dumped in the Tiber during the June festivals. The sun finally creeps over the Palatine Hill, and you remember the day 24 years ago when you became one of the chosen. You were 6 years old, playing with a wooden doll in your family's garden, when the Pontifex Maximus arrived with his entourage. Your mother went pale. She knew why he'd come. The previous week, a Vestal named Claudia had completed her 30 years of service, creating a vacancy that must be filled. 20 little girls from patrician families had been nominated, all between 6 and 10 years old, all with living parents, all physically perfect. The requirements sound arbitrary, until you realize they're designed to ensure unquestionable purity. No orphans who might carry bad luck. No physical imperfections that might offend the goddess. Your name went into the urn with 19 others, and the Pontifex Maximus drew it out with fingers that smelled of sacrificial incense. Your mother wept. Your father stood stoically, honored but grieving. You didn't understand why everyone looked so serious. You were going to live in a palace and tend a magic fire. What 6-year-old wouldn't want that? The reality, of course, proved more complicated. Within an hour, the Pontifex had captured you in the ritual formula, speaking the ancient words, "I take you, beloved, to be a Vestal priestess, who will perform the sacred rites on behalf of the Roman people." That night, you slept in the house of Vestals for the first time, in a tiny cubicle that would be yours for 3 decades. The older Vestals tried to comfort you, but you cried for your mother until dawn. Training began immediately. No gentle transition period, no time to adjust. The senior Vestal, a woman named Oxia who'd served for 57 years, took charge of your education with the efficiency of a drill sergeant. You learned to read and write, properly. Not just the basic letters most Roman girls managed. Mathematics, because you'd be managing temple finances, history, law, religious protocol, the proper way to grind mola salsa, the sacred salted flour used in every state sacrifice. You memorized the calendar of festivals, the names of every god and their particular preferences, the 12 tables of Roman law that you might need when exercising your unique legal privileges. But mostly, you learned about purity, not just virginity, though that obsession dominated everything, but ritual cleanliness that bordered on compulsion. You washed your hands 12 times before touching the sacred implements. You bathed in water drawn from a specific spring, carried in vessels that had never touched the ground. Your clothes could only be woven from wool shorn from white sheep that had never been bred. The peculiar part. Modern historians still debate whether the Vestal's virginity was actually about sex or something more abstract. Some argue the Latin term virgo meant unmarried rather than physically virginal, pointing out that Vestals could marry after their service. Others insist the Romans were exactly as obsessed with hymens as we assume. You suspect the truth involves both interpretations. You must remain sexually untouched. Yes, but more importantly, you must belong to no man. Reserved entirely for the state and its gods. By age 10, you could perform the basic rituals. By 12, you were trusted to tend the fire alone during daylight hours. By 14, you'd witnessed your first execution of a Vestal who'd broken her vows, though you tried to block out her screams as they sealed her in the underground chamber. The older Vestals said it would make you stronger, more committed to your own purity. Mostly it gave you nightmares. Now, as a 30-year-old woman who spent more than 2 decades in service, your daily routine flows like water over stone, carved by repetition into unchangeable channels. After your dawn fire tending, you join your 5 sister priestesses in the preparation room, where today's ceremonies demand attention. The Roman state runs on ritual, and you're one of its primary engines. You start with the mola salsa, that sacred salted flour that Rome sprinkles on every sacrificial animal from pigeons to bulls. The preparation seems simple, roasted spelt mixed with salt, but every step carries weight. The grain must come from specific fields, harvested on odd-numbered days in early May. You parch it in the oldest ovens in Rome, ones that have never been contaminated by profane cooking. The salt gets even more complicated. You gather it from salt pans, dissolve it in sacred spring water, let it crystallize in special vessels, then crush it with bronze implements that have never touched meat. Your fingers work the mortar and pestle in precise circles, grinding the mixture to powder while murmuring protective formulas. One batch takes 3 hours to prepare properly, and you'll need 12 pounds for tomorrow's sacrifice to Mars. The other Vestals work alongside you, Liciniia preparing holy water, Fabia cleaning the ritual knives, young Claudia learning to braid the woolen fillies that will decorate the doomed oxen. By mid-morning, petitioners begin arriving. A senator needs you to witness his will. Only documents sealed by Vestals carry absolute legal authority. You press your seal into the warm wax. Knowing this impression makes the document inviolate. Even emperors think twice before breaking a Vestal seal. Historians argue whether this power came from religious awe or practical politics. But you've seen grown men tremble when handling your sealed documents, so the distinction hardly matters. Next comes a condemned criminal's mother, begging you to intervene. You have the power to free anyone you encounter on their way to execution. A single touch grants pardon. The catch? You must meet them accidentally. Planned interventions don't count. The goddess won't honor deliberate interference with justice. You arrange to take a walk along the Via Appia at precisely the hour the execution procession will pass. Purely coincidental. Of course. The afternoon brings the really messy work. A white heifer awaits sacrifice in the temple courtyard, and you must catch its blood in the sacred patera. The animal's eyes roll wildly as the victimarius raises his hammer. You've seen this hundreds of times, but the moment before the blow still makes your stomach clench. The hammer falls. The assistant's knife flashes across the throat, and hot blood fountains into your bowl. Some splashes on your stola. You'll spend hours tonight getting the stains out. But for now you must focus on the ritual. You carry the blood to Vesta's altar, pouring it in careful libations while reciting prayers for Rome's protection. The meat will feed the urban poor. The hide will become military equipment. But the blood belongs to the gods. You wonder sometimes if Vesta actually enjoys all this carnage, or if she'd prefer simple offerings of grain and oil. But tradition is tradition, and Romans don't survive by ignoring what works. Evening brings administrative duties. The temple owns vast estates across Italy, and someone must manage the accounts. You review receipts from tenant farmers, approve repairs to aqueducts on Vestal lands, sign contracts for next season's grain supplies. Your mathematical training serves you well. You catch 3 calculation errors that would have cost the temple treasury hundreds of auri. Your stylus pauses over a wax tablet as shouting erupts from the forum below. Through the window, you watch lictors clearing a path for your youngest sister priestess, 16-year-old Claudia, returning from the markets. The crowds part like water before her, men removing their togas from their left shoulders in respect, women lowering their eyes. The power radiating from that slim figure in white still amazes you. Even after all these years, you possess privileges that would make senators envious. You can own property in your own name, revolutionary in a world where most women exist as perpetual dependents. You drive through Rome in a carpentum, a covered carriage forbidden to all other women except empresses. When you attend the theatre or gladiatorial games, you sit with the senators, not relegated to the upper tiers with other females. The fasces, those bundled rods symbolizing state authority, lower before you as they do for magistrates. But the real power runs deeper than symbols. Last week, you testified in court, and unlike every other woman in Rome, you didn't need a male guardian's permission. You swore your oath standing, not on your knees like common witnesses. Your word alone convicted a merchant of fraud. No supporting evidence needed, no corroboration required. A Vestal's testimony is considered divinely guaranteed truth. The political influence makes things interesting. Senators slip you bribes disguised as temple donations, hoping you'll whisper their names favorably when you dine with the emperor. You accept the gold. The temple always needs funds, but you whisper whatever names you please. Or sometimes you whisper warnings about corruption, watching powerful men pale as they realize their schemes have reached divine ears. Your most unsettling privilege? You're one of the few people allowed to enter the emperor's presence armed. That ceremonial knife at your belt isn't just for sacrifices. Of course, you'd never actually stab anyone, probably, but the symbolism matters. Even Rome's absolute ruler must respect Vesta's servants. Emperor Tiberius once joked nervously that 6 women with knives made him more anxious than the entire Praetorian Guard. The crowds below have dispersed, but a senator lingers near your door. You recognize him, Marcus Crassus, who's been trying to secure your support for his consulship bid. He can't enter the house of Vestals uninvited, so he hovers like a lovesick teenager, hoping you'll notice him. You let him wait. The man who controls half the Senate's votes must stand in the street like a beggar when he needs a Vestal's favor. Eventually, you take pity and invite him to the reception room. He practically prostrates himself, offering donations that would buy a small villa. You listen to his promises of temple renovations, new statues for Vesta, improved salaries for the temple slaves. All bribes, naturally, but elegantly presented. You make non-committal noises while mentally calculating how much marble his gold could purchase. The meeting ends with your standard formula. Vesta will remember your devotion. It means nothing and everything. Maybe you'll support his consulship. Maybe you won't. The uncertainty will eat at him for weeks, making him even more generous. You've learned to play this game expertly, keeping powerful men dangling while extracting maximum benefit for the temple. Your unique legal status creates odd situations. Technically, you exist outside normal law, neither daughter nor wife, neither virgin nor matron. You're sui juris, legally independent, yet bound by restrictions no free Roman would tolerate. You can condemn a man to death with your testimony but can't leave the city without permission. You manage millions in temple assets but can't choose your own clothes. The contradictions would be maddening if you hadn't learned to exploit them. The senator finally leaves, and you retreat to your private quarters in the house of Vestals, a space that would make most Roman nobles jealous. Your room spans 40 feet, with frescoed walls depicting mythological scenes and windows overlooking the forum's constant chaos. The bed features Egyptian linens and stuffed mattresses, not the straw pallets common folk endure. A private bathing chamber adjoins your bedroom, fed by diverted aqueduct water that stays warm year-round, thanks to the hypocaust system beneath the floors. You share this palace with 5 other women, but it never feels crowded. The house of Vestals sprawls across 3 stories, wrapped around a central courtyard where roses bloom between statues of distinguished former priestesses. 50 rooms provide space for everything from weaving workshops to libraries, from kitchen complexes to reception halls where you entertain everyone from foreign ambassadors to anxious mothers seeking divine intervention. The irony doesn't escape you. Virgin priestesses living in more luxury than most married women will ever see. Your clothes might be regulation white, but they're woven from silk imported from China, wool from specially bred sheep, linen so fine it feels like mist. The suffibulum covering your hair features embroidery with actual gold thread. Even your sandals are works of art. Tooled leather decorated with tiny pearls. Meals arrive prepared by a staff of 20 cooks who compete to tempt your palate. Tonight's dinner includes roasted peacocks stuffed with dates, wine from the emperor's personal vineyard, honey cakes shaped like temple doves. You eat from silver plates, drink from crystal goblets. Wipe your fingers on napkins scented with Arabian perfumes. The contrast with your supposed spiritual purity creates cognitive dissonance you've learned to ignore. But luxury comes with invisible chains. You can't leave this beautiful prison without permission and escort. Every trip outside requires planning. Which routes avoid taverns and brothels? Which markets won't offend your sacred eyes? You travel in that carpentum not just for privilege, but for protection. Curtains drawn to shield you from the city's contamination. Sometimes you feel less like a priestess and more like an exotic bird in a very expensive cage. Your daily freedoms exist within strict boundaries. You can read any book in the temple library, one of Rome's finest collections, but certain Greek poems have pages glued shut to protect your innocence. You practice music on the lyre and flute, but only sacred melodies, never the popular songs that echo from taverns. You exercise in private gardens, swimming in a pool reserved for Vestals alone, because gods forbid anyone see your sacred ankles. The other Vestals become your world by necessity. Licinia, the senior priestess at 48, rules with iron discipline softened by unexpected humor. She tells the filthiest jokes you've ever heard, delivered in such deadpan style that it takes moments to realize sweet-faced Licinia just made a crude comparison between ritual implements and male anatomy. Fabia obsesses over astrology, casting horoscopes for everyone while insisting the stars prove she should have been born a man. Young Claudia writes poetry when she thinks nobody's watching. Epic verses about heroes who sound suspiciously like the gladiators she's not supposed to notice. Personal slaves attend your every need, dressing you, styling your hair, managing correspondence. Your body slave, a German woman named Goethe, has served you 15 years. She knows your moods better than you do. Preparing chamomile tea before headaches start. Scheduling baths when irritation builds. The relationship blurs between servant and companion. She's the only person who sees you naked, who knows about the birthmark on your shoulder, who holds your hair when sacrificial smoke makes you nauseous. The luxury feels particularly hollow when you remember what happens to Vestals who break their vows. You've witnessed 3 executions in your 24 years of service, and each one carved deeper grooves in your psyche. The first happened when you were 12, old enough to understand but too young to process the horror properly. A Vestal named Cornelia had been caught with a lover, a young patrician who thought his family name would protect them both. The trial took place in the Regia, with the Pontifex Maximus presiding over the College of Pontiffs. You sat with the other Vestals, forced to watch as evidence mounted. Love letters in Cornelia's hand, testimony from slaves who'd carried messages, a ring bearing his seal found in her chamber. She denied nothing by the end, sitting straight-backed while the pontiffs debated her fate as if discussing weather. The verdict was never in doubt. For him, public scourging until death, a mercy compared to her sentence. The Roman logic runs thus. You can't spill a Vestal's blood. That would pollute the city. You can't strangle her, burn her, drown her. All traditional executions would offend Vesta, so they found a loophole that preserves technical innocence while achieving the same result. They bury you alive. The Campus Celeratus, the evil field, sits near the Colline Gate, a patch of cursed ground where nothing grows properly. You travelled there in procession, all 6 Vestals required to witness. Cornelia rode in a closed litter, already dressed in funeral clothes, already dead in law if not in fact. Citizens lined the streets in absolute silence, the only sound coming from the bells on her litter that rang with each step. The underground chamber had been prepared with horrible efficiency. A small room, perhaps 10 feet square, carved from solid rock. They'd furnished it with a couch, a lamp with one day's oil, a loaf of bread, a jug of water, a pot of milk. These provisions maintained the fiction. See, we're not executing her, just placing her underground with supplies. If Vestal wants to save her, surely the goddess will intervene. They led Cornelia down the ladder while you watched from above. She didn't cry, didn't beg, just descended with the dignity they'd beaten into us since childhood. The Pontifex Maximus performed the final rituals, absolving the city of guilt, transferring responsibility to the goddess. Then workers sealed the entrance with stones and mortar, covering it with earth until no trace remained. Somewhere beneath your feet, Cornelia was learning how long a single lamp could hold back the darkness. You returned monthly for a year, leaving flowers that nobody acknowledged. The ground eventually settled, forming a slight depression that filled with rainwater. They say you can still hear crying on quiet nights, but you know that's just wind through the tombs. Cornelia's voice went silent after 3 days. You know, because you counted. Lying awake and wondering if she drank the milk first or saved it, whether she ate the bread in tiny ratios or gorged in despair. Historians debate whether Vestals actually died for breaking vows or if charges were politically motivated. The second execution you witnessed and supports the political theory. Aemilia supposedly corrupted during Sulla's dictatorship, conveniently removing a priestess whose brothers opposed him. But the third case left no doubt. You yourself caught Licinia's predecessor with a gladiator in the temple gardens, their bodies intertwined beneath Vesta's own roses. Some violations can't be explained away as political conspiracy. The psychological weight of potential execution shapes every interaction. When the young priest of Mars smiles at you during joint ceremonies, you feel death's shadow. When your fingers accidentally brush a senator's while accepting a donation, you scrub your hands raw afterward. The underground chamber haunts your dreams. Sometimes you're Cornelia descending the ladder. Sometimes you're the one shoveling earth over screams. You shake off the morbid memories and focus on today's most delicate task, managing Rome's secrets. The temple strong rooms hold more than gold and silver. They contain the documents that could topple empires, all protected by sacred law and very real locks. You descend marble steps to the underground vaults, where iron doors require 3 different keys. One hangs from your belt, another from Licinia's, the third from Fabia's. No single Vestal can access these chambers alone. The first room holds wills, thousands of them, from senators and merchants, generals and emperors. Julius Caesar deposited his testament here, sealed with wax and Vestal magic. You were too young then, but older priestesses described the chaos when they opened it after the Ides of March, revealing that he'd adopted Octavian and left gardens to the people of Rome. That single document changed history, all because Caesar trusted Vestal integrity over his own family. You run your fingers along the shelves, reading names on the sealed cylinders. Some have waited decades for death to trigger their opening. Others might wait centuries. Wealthy Romans often create multiple wills, updating them as heirs disappoint or new favorites emerge. The temple charges hefty storage fees, naturally. Even death generates income when you're managing divine real estate. The second vault contains state documents, treaties with foreign powers, records of secret alliances, maps showing the true disposition of legions. The Senate pretends these don't exist, maintaining public fiction while privately depending on Vestal discretion. You've read things that would start wars if revealed. Peace agreements with clauses the Roman people would never accept. Records of bribes that keep client kings loyal. Knowledge truly is power, and you're swimming in enough secrets to drown the empire. But the third room holds the real treasures, the sacred objects that legitimize Roman rule. The Palladium, that ancient statue of Minerva supposedly rescued from Troy, stands in its special shrine. Only the Vestal Maxima can look upon it directly. Even you must avert your eyes. There's the Ancilia, the sacred shields of Mars. Though you know 11 are copies, the original fell from heaven, and its preservation guarantees Roman military supremacy. Smart policy to hide it among duplicates. Modern scholars argue whether these objects held real power or just psychological influence. You lean toward psychology. The Palladium looks remarkably like a badly carved log. Hardly divine craftsmanship. But when enemy armies approach Rome, citizens sleep better, knowing Vesta's virgins guard their sacred talismans. Belief creates its own reality, and you've become an expert at maintaining necessary illusions. The documents require constant attention. Wax seals crack in summer heat. Winter dampness threatens papyrus. Mice consider ancient treaties delicious. You spend hours each week on preservation, transferring older texts to fresh materials, checking seal integrity, ensuring nothing disappears into scholarly black markets. One missing will could trigger inheritance disputes that tear families apart. One leaked treaty might start wars Rome can't afford. Your position as secret keeper creates interesting situations. Last month, a senator tried bribing you to reveal whether his name appeared in his uncle's will. You smiled sweetly and quintupled the temple's standard donation request. He paid, of course, they always do. But you told him nothing. The information stays locked until death breaks the seal. That's the deal. Non-negotiable since the Republic's founding. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if all these secrets spilled at once. Every dirty deal exposed, every hidden alliance revealed, every inheritance made public before its time. Rome would probably collapse in a week, crushed under the weight of its own deceptions. Good thing you and your sisters value job security over truth. The empire runs on selective disclosure, and you've become a master at keeping dangerous knowledge properly buried. The calendar tyrannizes your life more than any human master could. Today brings the Fordicidia, one of 43 festivals requiring Vestal participation. You barely finish cataloguing yesterday's deposited secrets before ritual obligations drag you back upstairs. April means pregnant cows must die for Tellus, the earth goddess who apparently craves unborn calves. The logic of divine appetite stopped making sense years ago, but you perform the ceremonies with practiced precision. You dress in your finest ritual stola, the one with purple borders that marks high ceremonies. The suffibulum gets extra pins today. You'll be moving constantly, and nothing ruins religious solemnity like chasing escaped veils across the forum. Licinia inspects each Vestal like a general reviewing troops. She adjusts Claudia's braids, straightens Fabia's fibula, nods approval at your perfectly draped garments. The procession forms at dawn. You carry the sacred implements, the gold patera for catching blood, the Secespita knife that only Vestals may touch, the molla salsa in its ancient wooden box. Behind you, attendants lead 15 pregnant heifers, their horns gilded and backs draped with embroidered cloth. The poor beasts low mournfully, heavy with calves they'll never deliver. Crowds pack the forum despite the early hour. Romans love their festivals, any excuse to skip work and watch religious pageantry. Children perch on their fathers' shoulders, pointing at your strange procession. Vendors hawk sacred cakes and wine. Though technically, commerce should cease during rituals, you maintain sacred dignity while internally calculating how much longer your bladder can last. The ceremony will take 6 hours, and divine virgins don't get bathroom breaks. At the altar, the Pontifex Maximus waits with his assistants. He begins the prayers, calling on Tellus to accept these offerings and grant Rome fertile fields. You step forward with the mola salsa, sprinkling the mixture on each heifer's head. The animals flinch at your touch. They sense what's coming. The victimariae move with professional efficiency, stunning and slaughtering while you catch fountains of blood. But here's the disturbing part. You must extract the unborn calves and burn them separately. Your hands, covered in sacred gloves, reach into still warm wombs to pull out tiny bodies. The smell of blood mixes with incense smoke, creating a miasma that makes younger priestesses gag. You've learned to breathe through your mouth and think about dinner plans while performing obstetric surgery on dead cattle. 31 festivals require similar involvement. The Vestalia in June means 9 days of non-stop ceremonies on. October's horse brings the delightful task of beheading the winner of a chariot race, because Mars enjoys equine craniums. Apparently, December's Bonadia festivities exclude all men so thoroughly that you must veil male statues and dismiss male slaves. Each festival demands perfect execution. One mispronounced word could invalidate the whole ceremony. The public appearances exhaust you more than the bloodshed. During the Megalesia, you sit through 4 days of theatrical performances, maintaining serene expressions while actors butcher Greek tragedies. The Ludi Romani demands attendance at chariot races where the crowd's roaring makes your head pound. You can't show boredom, can't yawn, can't even fan yourself too vigorously. Every gesture gets scrutinized for divine meaning. Between major festivals, minor rituals fill the gaps. Weekly sacrifices to Vesta, monthly purifications of the temple, daily offerings at dozens shrines throughout Rome. You process through the streets so often that regular vendors know your route, timing their lunch breaks to watch you pass. One baker always waves. You've never acknowledged him, but his consistent presence has become oddly comforting. The constant performance wears on your nerves. Every public moment requires calculated perfection. Shoulders back, chin elevated, eyes focused on middle distance. Never acknowledge the plebs shouting for blessings. Never react to children who run too close. Never show fatigue when summer sun beats down on wool garments designed for modesty. Not Mediterranean heat. You're not a woman anymore. You're a walking symbol of Roman piety. After the Fordicidia's bloody conclusion, you retreat to the temple library, your favorite sanctuary within a sanctuary. The smell of papyrus and ink soothes nerves frayed by public spectacle. Here, surrounded by thousands of scrolls, you remember why enduring the rest becomes worthwhile. Vestals enjoy educational privileges that other Roman women can only dream about. And you've gorged yourself on knowledge like a starling in a granary. Your Greek tutor arrives at the 3rd hour, a freedman named Demetrius, whose patience rivals the gods. 20 years ago, you butchered Homer's verses with atrocious pronunciation. Now you debate Aristotelian logic in fluent Attic Greek, your accent polished enough to impress Athenian ambassadors. Demetrius currently guides you through Ptolemy's astronomical treatises, complex mathematics that make your eyes cross but explain why the temple's calendar occasionally needs adjustment. Languages came first in your education: Greek for philosophy and science, Etruscan for ancient rituals, even basic Egyptian for diplomatic correspondence. Then literature. You've memorized Virgil, analyzed Livy, struggled through Ennius's archaic Latin. History fills shelf after shelf of your personal collection. You know Rome's story from Romulus to yesterday, plus enough foreign history to understand why Parthians hate Romans and Germans hate everyone. But the real education happens between formal lessons. Licinia teaches political theory through gossip, analyzing Senate factions while pretending to discuss festival preparations. Fabia shares medical knowledge gained from treating temple slaves. You can now set bones, birth babies, and mix poultices for everything from headaches to hemorrhoids. The temple physician theoretically handles healthcare, but he's usually drunk by noon. So practical medicine falls to educated women who aren't supposed to know which herbs prevent pregnancy. Your mathematical training serves constant purpose. Temple accounts require advanced calculation, compound interest on loans, currency conversions for foreign donations, construction estimates for building repairs. You've caught 3 contractors trying to embezzle through creative arithmetic. The third one turned pale when you corrected his figures in front of the entire building commission, stylus flying across wax tablets as you exposed each fraudulent line item. Philosophy provides mental escape from routine drudgery. You prefer the Stoics. Marcus Aurelius's meditations speak to someone trapped in lifelong service. His thoughts on duty and acceptance resonate when you're scrubbing blood from altar stones, though you also enjoy Epicurus for pure scandal value. A virgin priestess reading about pleasure as life's highest goal. The irony tastes delicious as stolen honey cakes. Scientific texts fascinate you most. Pliny's natural history occupies pride of place on your shelf, its encyclopedic strangeness perfect for sleepless nights. You've learned that elephants fear mice, that certain stones cure madness, that phoenixes might exist in Arabia. Most of it sounds like nonsense, but then you remember you spend your days tending magic fire that protects an empire. Who are you to judge which impossibilities deserve belief? Writing becomes your secret vice, not just copying texts, though you've transcribed hundreds of scrolls for the temple archives, but creating original works. Hidden in your private study sits a half-finished history of the Vestal order, compiled from ancient records and personal observations. You write philosophical dialogues between fictional priestesses, debating the nature of purity. Poetry flows when inspiration strikes. Verses about sacred flames that sound suspiciously like metaphors for suppressed desires. The younger Vestals benefit from your knowledge. You teach Claudia astronomy, showing her how to calculate festival dates using celestial observations. She's quick, grasping concepts that took you years to understand. Sometimes you wonder if she'll use this education better than you have. Perhaps she'll write openly instead of hiding manuscripts. Perhaps she'll demand recognition for intellectual achievements. Or perhaps she'll follow your path, hoarding knowledge like temple gold, rich beyond measure, but unable to spend it freely. Your stylus scratches across papyrus as you review this month's financial statements. The Vestal order controls wealth that would make Croesus jealous, estates across Italy, urban properties in Rome, investments in shipping ventures, loans to everyone from corner bakers to consulars. The sacred fire might guarantee Rome's spiritual safety, but rental income keeps the temple functioning. The numbers tell interesting stories. That farm near Tusculum produces twice the olive oil it did 5 years ago, thanks to improved pressing techniques you learned from Syrian merchants. The apartment blocks in the Subura generate steady revenue despite constant repairs. Apparently, even divine landlords can't escape tenement maintenance. Your newest acquisition, a vineyard in Campania, came from a senator who'd rather donate property than explain why his pregnant wife visited the temple at midnight. Banking operations consume entire mornings. Vestals function as Rome's most trusted financial institution. Who better to hold deposits than virgins who can't flee with the funds? Your underground vaults contain personal fortunes, merchant guild treasuries, dowries waiting for girls to reach marriageable age. The interest rates you charge would scandalize modern economists, but seem perfectly reasonable to Romans desperate for secure storage. You've developed a talent for investment. That shipping venture to Alexandria, your idea, funded by temple reserves, returning 30% profit annually. The loan to finance new aqueduct construction, structured with payment terms that ensure income for decades. Even your charitable giving generates returns. Funding schools for plebeian children creates educated workers for Vestal properties. The wealth brings ethical complications. Yesterday, a widow begged for loan forgiveness, her husband's death leaving debts she can't repay. Temple policy demands full collection, but you see her children's hollow cheeks. You quietly restructure the debt, extending terms until her son reaches working age. Licinia pretends not to notice when you doctor the records. Divine virgin or not, you're still human enough to choose mercy over maximum profit. Managing slaves occupies significant time. The temple owns hundreds, agricultural workers, household servants, skilled craftsmen, even educated secretaries. You hate the system, but can't change it, so you focus on harm reduction. Temple slaves eat better than many free citizens, receive medical care, can earn peculium toward eventual manumission. It's still slavery, but you sleep better knowing your property rights include human dignity. Commercial negotiations test your education. This afternoon brings a meeting with Egyptian grain merchants who assume virgin priestesses know nothing about commodity prices. You let them mansplain market fluctuations while mentally calculating how their offered rates compare to last season's averages. When they finish their patronizing presentation, you counter with figures that prove you've tracked Mediterranean grain prices for the past decade. Their shock when you negotiate in fluent Greek adds extra satisfaction. Property management requires constant vigilance. That tenement fire last month. You personally supervise rebuilding, ensuring contractors use proper materials instead of cheap substitutes. The new shops at street level now feature fire-resistant stone facades, an innovation you borrowed from Alexandrian architecture texts. Higher construction costs mean lower immediate profits, but you're building for centuries, not quarters. Your strangest assets include commercial monopolies granted by grateful emperors. The temple holds exclusive rights to sell certain sacrificial items, special incense, particular wine vintages, the exact type of wool used for ritual garments. It's essentially religious racketeering, but highly profitable. Every priest in Rome must purchase supplies from Vestal-approved vendors who kick back percentages to temple coffers. Personal wealth accumulates despite vows of simplicity. Your salary, property gifts from grateful petitioners, percentages from managed assets, it all pools in accounts you can't spend freely. You own 3 villas you've never visited, have enough gold to buy a small army, could retire tomorrow as one of Rome's richest women. Instead, you wear the same white robes and count someone else's money, a millionaire monk trapped in marble halls. The money means nothing compared to the relationships you've lost and the ones you can't properly form. Your father died 10 years ago, and you stood at his funeral pyre as a priestess, not a daughter. Protocol demanded you remain with the other Vestals, separate from your grieving family, performing ritual purifications while your mother wept alone. You wanted to embrace her, to keen and wail like a proper Roman daughter, but sacred virgins don't display excessive emotion. Your brother visits monthly, these meetings structured like diplomatic negotiations. He sits across from you in the formal reception room, updating you on family matters with stiff formality. His children, your nephews and niece you barely know, fidget in their best clothes, clearly instructed not to touch their holy aunt. You give them educational gifts, appropriate for a priestess to bestow, while longing to ruffle their hair or teach them the silly songs you remember from your own truncated childhood. The distance hurts most during family celebrations. When your sister married, you attended as divine witness rather than sibling. You blessed the union with sacred words while she smiled at you across an unbridgeable gulf. Her letters arrive regularly, filled with domestic details that read like reports from an alien world. She describes pregnancy symptoms, teething babies, marital disputes over household expenses, a life you understand intellectually but can't access emotionally. Roman society treats you with schizophrenic confusion. You're simultaneously revered and pitied, powerful and infantilized. Matrons defer to your religious authority while whispering about your unnatural state. Men bow respectfully, but struggle to categorize you. Not virgin daughter, not married woman, not widow, not prostitute. You exist in a social limbo that makes every interaction feel like navigating a minefield. Friendship with other women proves nearly impossible. Your sacred status creates automatic barriers. Who can complain about their husbands to someone who'll never have one? You can't reciprocate their confidences, can't share equivalent experiences, can't even visit their homes without purification rituals. The few who attempt friendship eventually drift away, tired of accommodating your restrictions. The other Vestals understand, but 6 women forced together by circumstance don't automatically become sisters. Personality clashes magnify in close quarters. Fabia's obsession with astrology grates on your preference for empirical evidence. Claudia's youth makes her dismiss your concerns as elderly grumbling, elderly at 30. Licinia maintains emotional distance as senior priestess, professional rather than personal. Your colleagues more than companions, bound by shared duty rather than chosen affection. Romance remains the great forbidden territory. You'd be lying if you claim complete disinterest. 30 years of virginity doesn't eliminate human desire. Sometimes during public ceremonies, you notice a tribune's strong jaw or a priest's gentle hands and feel that unwelcome flutter. The sensation brings immediate guilt, followed by frantic mental recitation of purification prayers. You've learned to redirect these feelings into acceptable channels: excessive temple cleaning, aggressive financial negotiations, exhausting intellectual study. But the subtler longings prove harder to suppress. Not sexual desire, but simple touch, a friend's casual embrace, a mother's comforting hand, the weight of a sleeping child in your arms. Vestals touch only in ritual contexts, and sacred gestures don't satisfy skin hungry for ordinary human contact. You sometimes accidentally brush against servants while passing, pathetic attempts to steal moments of connection. The loneliness manifests physically. Headaches plague you. Shoulders knotted with tension, no massage can relieve. Because who could properly touch a Vestal's sacred body? You develop stomach complaints that the physician blames on divine sensitivity, but you suspect come from swallowing decades of unspoken words. Sleep brings little relief when dreams feature family dinners you can't attend, children you'll never bear, conversations you're forbidden to have. Yet revealing any struggle would shatter the illusion of serene dedication. Rome needs to believe its virgin priestesses gladly sacrifice personal happiness for collective benefit. So you smile during public appearances, radiate calm authority, pretend that tending sacred flames fulfills all human needs. The performance exhausts you more than any physical labor. This constant projection of contentment you don't feel, your body, that sacred vessel you've maintained for 3 decades, begins showing signs of wear. The headaches that started as occasional annoyances now strike with vicious regularity, especially after ceremonies involving heavy incense. You've learned to recognize the warning signs: light sensitivity, phantom smells, that peculiar tingling in your left temple, and retreat to your chambers before full agony descends. The temple physician, when sober enough to examine you, prescribes treatments ranging from useless to disturbing. Powdered pearls mixed with wine, he insists, will cool your excess humors. Bloodletting might release corrupt spirits. His favorite remedy involves trepanation, drilling holes in your skull to relieve pressure. You politely decline and rely instead on Fabier's herbal knowledge. Her willow bark tea tastes like bitter defeat, but actually helps, unlike the physician's expensive quackery. Physical deterioration accompanies your advancing years. Kneeling on cold marble for hours during rituals has destroyed your knees. You feel weather changes in joints that creak like unoiled hinges. That elegant glide you perfected as a young priestess now requires conscious effort to maintain. Steps you once bounded up leave you breathless. The sacred implements feel heavier each year, though you die before showing weakness during ceremonies. Menstruation brings its own complications in a virgin priesthood. The Romans consider menstrual blood deeply polluting, yet nature doesn't pause for religious sensibilities. During your monthly bleeding, you're technically too impure to tend the sacred flame, but someone must maintain the fire. The older Vestals taught you their solution: elaborate purification rituals that satisfy doctrinal requirements while keeping reality functioning. You bathe 7 times daily, burn specific herbs, recite cleansing prayers that would horrify male priests who pretend women don't bleed. Aging Vestals face unique medical challenges. When Licinia developed breast lumps last year, finding appropriate treatment became a theological crisis. Male physicians examining a Vestal's body, unthinkable. Female healers with sufficient skill, rare and viewed suspiciously. She ended up consulting an Egyptian woman who'd learned medicine in Alexandria, one of the few female practitioners Romans grudgingly respect. The lumps proved benign, but the experience highlighted how sacred virginity complicates basic healthcare. Your eyes, strained by years of reading in lamplight, now struggle with fine text. You've commissioned special lenses from a Syrian glassworker, curved crystals that magnify writing. The device marks you as aging, but vanity surrenders to necessity when you're managing temple accounts. Wrong numbers due to weak vision could cost more than pride. Mental health receives even less consideration than physical ailments. Vestals who crack under pressure get labeled as divinely touched rather than humanly broken. You remember Quinta, who served before you, developing what modern medicine might call severe anxiety. She'd wash her hands until they bled, convinced that invisible pollution threatened the sacred flame. The priest declared her specially chosen by Vesta for extreme purity. She died at 42. Worn out by compulsions everyone praised as exceptional devotion. You've developed your own coping mechanisms. That collection of poetry hidden in your room? essential for sanity. The long walks through temple gardens, moving meditation that keeps despair at bay, the theoretical astronomical calculations, mental exercise preventing your brain from fixating on restrictions, your self-medicating with intellectual pursuits, using knowledge as both stimulant and sedative. Sleep becomes increasingly elusive. You lie awake, calculating compound interest, conjugating irregular Greek verbs, mentally rehearsing tomorrow's ceremonies, anything to avoid confronting the crushing weight of accumulated years. When exhaustion finally claims you, dreams bring no relief. You're either failing to keep the fire lit or back in that underground chamber with Cornelia. Sometimes you dream of freedom so vividly that waking feels like re-entering prison. The other Vestals pretend not to notice each other's decline. It's a mutual conspiracy of silence. Acknowledging weakness might invite questions about the system itself. So you all maintain facades of serene competence, while privately battling bodies and minds pushed beyond reasonable limits. The sacred flame never sleeps, and neither, it seems, do its guardians. 6 years from now, you'll walk out of this temple a free woman. The thought terrifies you more than any underground burial chamber. At 36, after 3 decades of service, Rome will release you into a world you understand only through books and glimpses from your carriage window. The prospect should bring joy, but instead it triggers anxiety that keeps you awake. Calculating how someone raised in sacred isolation survives secular reality. Technically, you'll be one of Rome's most eligible women, wealthy, educated, still young enough to bear children. The law encourages former Vestals to marry, contributing to Rome's population after years of ceremonial sterility. Augustus even offered tax incentives to men who wed ex-priestesses, apparently believing that 30 years of stored virginity creates extra fertile wives. The logic would be laughable if it weren't your future being legislated, but reality proves harsher than imperial optimism. You've watched 5 Vestals complete their service during your tenure, and their post-temple lives follow depressing patterns. Cornelia the elder married a senator who wanted her money more than her person. She died in childbirth at 38, her virgin body unprepared for late pregnancy's demands. Julia retreated to a rural villa, becoming a recluse who communicated only through letters. Marina tried integrating into Roman society, but killed herself after 2 years, unable to adjust to freedom's chaos. The successful transitions, and there are some, require careful planning. Amelia used her wealth to establish a school for girls, channeling her education into acceptable feminine charity. She never married, but built a fulfilling life around intellectual pursuits. Claudia the elder became a successful merchant, applying temple-learned financial skills to private enterprise. Neither pretended to be normal Roman matrons. They created new categories for themselves. You've started preparing, secretly accumulating practical knowledge. How does one hire servants without temple administrators handling details? What do ordinary women wear when not restricted to sacred white? How do you shop in markets when you've never touched common currency? These mundane skills, automatic for freeborn Romans, require conscious study for someone raised in marble isolation. Social integration poses the greatest challenge. You can't simply appear at dinner parties after 30 years' absence from normal society. Your conversation skills center on ritual procedures, astronomical calculations, and theoretical philosophy, hardly small talk for banquets. You don't understand current fashion, popular entertainment, or domestic management, You're a scholar, priestess, accountant trying to become a regular woman, like asking a fish to climb trees. The marriage question haunts your planning. Part of you craves the physical intimacy you've been denied. Not just sex, but simple affection. Sharing a bed with someone who chose you rather than tradition. But you're also terrified. Your body at 36 remains technically virginal, but hardly young. Would a husband be patient with inexperience? Would physical intimacy bring pleasure or just pain? The unknown creates anxiety that manifests in defensive anger. How dare Rome assume you'll eagerly spread your legs after 3 decades of enforced chastity? Financial independence offers some comfort. You'll leave with accumulated salary, property gifts, and investment returns. Enough wealth to live comfortably without relying on male support. You could buy a house, hire guards, maintain yourself as a perpetual widow without the inconvenient dead husband. Money can't purchase social acceptance, but it can insulate you from worst-case scenarios. You've observed how Rome treats older, unmarried women, with suspicion ranging from pity to accusation. Without the Vestal's sacred status, you'll become just another eccentric female, vulnerable to gossip and exploitation. Your education will mark you as unnaturally intellectual. Your wealth will attract fortune hunters. Your childlessness will invite speculation about barrenness or secret vice. The very qualities that make you exceptional as a priestess will make you problematic as a private citizen. Sometimes you wonder if you'll simply exchange one prison for another, leaving temple restrictions only to find society's expectations equally confining. At least here, the rules are explicit. Out there, you'll navigate unwritten codes you never learned, constantly failing tests you didn't know existed. The sacred flame, for all its demands, never judges your social graces or maternal instincts. Your contemplation of uncertain futures gets interrupted by Claudia, arguing with Licinia about historical precedents. They're debating whether Rhea Silvia, the Vestal who bore Romulus and Remus, was actually raped by Mars or just claimed divine assault to avoid execution. The argument has raged for centuries. Was she a victim of gods, men, or her own desires? You've heard every interpretation, but the story still fascinates because it shows even Rome's foundation myth involves a Vestal breaking her vows. The Order's history reads like a catalogue of exceptional women trapped between divinity and humanity. You know their names better than your own ancestors. Aemilia, who miraculously rekindled the sacred fire with her veil when it died, proving her innocence. Claudia Quinta, who single-handedly pulled a ship carrying Cybele's statue up the Tiber, demonstrating divine favor. Tuccia, who carried water in a sieve without spilling a drop, validating her purity through impossible physics. But you prefer the complicated ones. The Vestals who showed human frailty beneath marble facades. Postumia, tried for impropriety because she dressed too elegantly and laughed too freely. Acquitted but warned to act more mournfully. Minutia, executed not for proven sexual misconduct, but for wearing excessive jewelry and showing suspicious cheerfulness. Their crimes essentially involved displaying personality, reminding Rome that sacred virgins remained inconveniently human. The political Vestals intrigue you most. Sempronia, who used her influence to protect the Gracchi brothers' reforms until their murders left her powerless. Fontea, who negotiated between Sulla and Marius during the civil wars, walking between armed camps in sacred robes that made her untouchable. These women wielded real power, shaping history through careful manipulation of religious authority. Modern Vestals seem pale compared to these legendary figures. Licinia manages competently but lacks visionary leadership. Fabia retreats into mysticism rather than engaging with contemporary challenges. You wonder if you'll merit even a footnote in future histories. She maintained adequate fire-tending standards and invested temple funds prudently. Hardly the stuff of epic poetry. Yet perhaps mundane competence matters more than dramatic gestures. The Vestals who kept Rome functioning through ordinary days, who never let the fire die or the rituals lapse. They built the foundation that let exceptional moments occur. Someone had to maintain the sacred flame while Claudia Quinta performed miracles. Someone counted coins while Fontea negotiated peace. History remembers the peaks, but forgets the steady plains between them. Collier provides your favorite example of Vestal ingenuity. When accused of impurity, she didn't rely on divine intervention or impossible proofs, instead, she demanded a formal trial with proper evidence, representation, and witness testimony, essentially inventing due process for religious accusations. Her logical arguments and procedural demands frustrated accusers expecting theatrical protests. She won through bureaucracy rather than miracles, a victory for rational thought over superstitious persecution. The foreign Vestals tell different stories. When Rome conquered other cities, they sometimes discovered local virgin priestesses tending similar sacred fires. Rather than extinguishing these flames, pragmatic Romans often incorporated them, expanding Vesta's worship through religious imperialism. You've read accounts of Spanish, Gallic, even British women serving modified versions of your role, adapting Roman rituals to local traditions. These syncretic priestesses faced unique challenges, maintaining authentic indigenous practices while satisfying Roman orthodoxy. Some succeeded brilliantly, creating hybrid ceremonies that honored both traditions. Others disappeared into historical silence, their flames extinguished by cultural conflict. You admire their attempts to bridge worlds, even when those bridges burned. Personal connections to past Vestals come through physical objects. That ivory hairpin belonged to Oxia, who served 57 years. The bronze lamp you use for dawn rituals supposedly came from Numa's original temple. Your favorite stylus was Papenia's, the Vestal who wrote philosophical treatises between fire tendings. These artifacts carry the weight of centuries, the accumulated devotion of women who walked your same paths, felt your same frustrations, found their own ways to survive. Sometimes you feel them watching, not as ghosts, but as inherited memory, genetic or cultural, passed through generations of shared experience. When you perform certain gestures, you sense countless hands making identical movements across centuries. The knowledge brings comfort during lonely vigils. You're not just one woman tending fire. You're the current link in an unbroken chain stretching back to Rome's foundation and forward to its eventual end. The news arrives on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Constantine has issued another edict, this one closing traditional temples and forbidding pagan sacrifices. You've watched Christianity spread through Rome like wine staining white cloth, but somehow believed the Vestal fire would remain exempt. Too ancient, too essential, too woven into Roman identity to simply extinguish. The emperor's messenger disagrees, standing in your reception hall with orders that end 1,000 years of continuous flame. Licinia calls an emergency meeting. 6 women sit in council, processing the incomprehensible. The sacred fire must die by month's end. No more Vestals will be selected. Current priestesses may complete their terms or accept immediate release with compensatory payments. The goddess Vesta, apparently, has been fired by bureaucratic decree. The practical details feel surreal. Centuries of accumulated treasures need dispersing. Will Christian authorities confiscate the palladium? Temple properties require transfer. Do your tenants now pay rent to the imperial treasury? The sacred implements you've spent decades maintaining suddenly become museum pieces. You inventory ritual objects with the detached efficiency of an estate sale, cataloguing items whose purpose will soon be forgotten. Rome itself seems unsure how to react. Some citizens protest, claiming disasters will follow the fire's extinction. Others shrug. Their grandparents converted years ago. Ancient traditions already fading from memory. The Senate issues weak objections, but senators who openly worship Christ lack credibility defending Vesta. You realize you're witnessing history's pivot point, the moment old gods officially yield to new. Your sisters react differently. Fabia retreats into astronomical calculations, seeking cosmic significance in Christianity's triumph. Young Claudia rages, composing bitter poems about imperial hypocrisy and religious intolerance. Two junior Vestals immediately accept release, eager to escape before forced conversion. Licinia maintains stoic dignity while privately drinking more wine than usual. You feel relieved. The emotion surprises you. But freedom through imperial decree beats retirement under suspicious scrutiny. Better to have the choice forced than spend years agonizing over voluntary departure. Plus, there's dark satisfaction in watching Rome abandon its most ancient protection. You've sacrificed 30 years maintaining their sacred insurance policy. Let them discover what happens when the premiums stop. The final days blur together. Priests arrive to inventory temple assets, their greedy eyes calculating gold's weight while ignoring its significance. You hide certain items, that philosopher's manuscript, your personal ritual implements, small treasures that would be destroyed or sold. Civil disobedience feels strange after lifetime obedience, but preserving memory matters more than following illegal orders. Citizens request final blessings, as if your sacred authority has an expiration date. You perform last rituals with extra care, knowing each ceremony joins the extinct. The final public sacrifice draws enormous crowds. People who ignored traditional worship suddenly desperate to witness history ending. You sprinkle the last molar salsa, catch the last ritual blood, speak the last public prayers to Vesta. The fire's extinction requires ceremony. You can't just stop feeding it. On the appointed night, all 6 Vestals gather in the inner sanctum. No male priests allowed, no imperial observers, just women who've spent their lives serving this flame. You speak words passed down from the order's foundation, thanking Vesta for centuries of protection, formally releasing her from obligation to Rome. Licinia removes the last log. You watch flames shrink, red fading to orange to barely visible blue. The moment stretches. Should you add more wood? Claim the fire died naturally? Maintain the fiction one more day? But exhaustion wins. The flame gutters. Sparks rise like escaping souls. And then, darkness. For the first time in 1,000 years, the temple stands cold. You sit in that darkness, 6 women around a dead hearth, processing the impossible. No lightning strikes, no earthquake swallow Rome. The god's abandonment comes not as dramatic catastrophe, but as silent absence. Your unemployed virgins in an empty temple, your purpose extinguished by imperial penstroke. Morning brings king's evacuation orders. You pack 3 decades into traveling chests, books, clothes, accumulated treasures both material and intellectual. Where will you go? Claudia has family in Milan. Fabia considers Alexandria's library. Licinia speaks vaguely of a villa near Naples. You're all scattering like ashes from that final fire, carried by the winds of change to unknown destinations. The morning of departure feels unreal. You dress in civilian clothes for the first time since childhood, a simple blue stola that feels scandalously colourful after decades of white. No suffibulum covers your hair. You're just another Roman woman now, indistinguishable from thousands flooding the streets. The transformation should feel liberating, but mostly you feel naked, exposed without sacred markers. Your hired carriage waits outside the temple gates. The driver, clearly uncomfortable transporting an ex-Vestal, avoids eye contact while loading your possessions. Or word has spread through Rome. The virgin priestesses are leaving, the old ways truly ending. Some citizens gather to watch, their faces mixing curiosity with something like grief. A few old women weep openly, remembering when Vestal blessings meant something. You've purchased a modest villa in Tusculum, close enough to Rome for necessary business, but distant enough to avoid daily reminders. The property includes vineyards, olive groves, a library that needs restocking, practical investments for a woman planning to live on rental income and agricultural profits. No more temple accounting, but your financial skills translate to private enterprise. Licinia embraces you at the gates, a breach of protocol that no longer matters. "Write to me," she whispers. This woman who shared your imprisonment for 2 decades. You promise letters you'll probably never send. What would you say? That freedom tastes like ashes? That you miss the certainty of sacred routine? Better to let distance dissolve bonds forged by circumstance rather than choice. The journey to Tusculum passes in hazy observations. Roadside shrines to old gods stand abandoned, their altars crumbling. Christian symbols mark every milestone, the Chiro replacing Jupiter's eagle, crude fish scratched over ancient dedications. Your driver mutters prayers to Christ when passing crossroads, seeking protection from a god who apparently dislikes virgin priestesses. Your new home sprawls across a hillside, its previous owner a senator who fled to Constantinople. The walls need repair, the gardens run wild, but potential exists beneath neglect. You direct servants, your own servants, hired with your own money, to prepare chambers that belong to you alone. No more communal living, no more scheduled routines, no more asking permission to exist. That first night brings unexpected terror. You lie in an unfamiliar bed, listening to countryside sounds that aren't muffled by marble walls. No one will wake you for dawn rituals. No sacred flame requires tending. The freedom you've craved for 30 years arrives as vertigo. A sailor suddenly landlocked, discovering sea legs don't work on solid ground. Days blur into weeks as you establish new patterns. Morning means reading in the garden, not rushing to tend fire. Afternoon brings estate management, reviewing accounts, supervising repairs, learning to be landowner rather than priestess. Evenings you write, that secret history of the Vestals finally emerging without fear of discovery. Neighbors visit cautiously. Provincial aristocrats curious about the exotic ex-virgin in their midst. You serve wine you chose yourself. Discuss poetry without checking for doctrinal violations. Wear colors that complement your complexion rather than advertising your status. Small freedoms accumulate like droplets forming streams, yet ghosts linger. You still wake at dawn from habit. Your hands move in ritual gestures while cooking. You catch yourself murmuring purification prayers before meals. 30 years of conditioning doesn't vanish because an emperor changed his mind. You're free in body but still enslaved by memory. As seasons turn and your new life solidifies, the ache lessens. You'll never marry. That ship sailed decades ago. You'll never fully integrate into normal society. But you're building something unique, a life shaped by unprecedented experience, funded by sacred service, informed by education few women achieve. Not the existence you'd have chosen at 6, but perhaps the one you've earned at 36. The Vestal order dies with Constantine's decree, but you survive. The sacred flame extinguished, but you carry its warmth in knowledge preserved, in wealth accumulated, in strength forged through restriction. Rome may have abandoned its virgin priestesses, but you refuse to abandon yourself. The eternal fire burns on, relocated from temple hearth to human heart, tended now by memory rather than obligation. Time slows now, like honey dripping from a spoon. The story of the Vestals fades into the evening air, their sacred flames finally extinguished but never quite forgotten. You feel your breathing deepen, your shoulders releasing tension you didn't know you carried. Think of those 6 women, scattered across the empire, each finding their own way to tend inner fires that no emperor could extinguish. Their marble temple stands empty now, but somewhere in Tusculum, an educated woman reads by lamplight. Somewhere in Milan, another tends her garden. Somewhere in Alexandria, astronomical calculations continue under desert stars. The night wraps around you like soft wool, warm and comforting. Your own bed feels more welcoming than cold marble floors. Your own choices more precious than golden ritual implements. Let their ancient stories settle into your bones. These tales of women who serve flames greater than themselves and survive to tell about it. Rest comes easier now, knowing that sacred fires take many forms, that dedication doesn't require marble temples. That morning will come whether or not anyone tends the dawn. Sleep finds you gently, carrying you far from Rome's rigid routines into dreams where you're free to tend whatever flames you choose.